पांडे ने जो कुछ कहा है उसके बाद में कुछ कह पाना बहुत मुश्किल है, क्योंकि ऐसा कोई मुद्दा नहीं है जिसको उन्होंने छुआ नहीं है, ऐसी कोई बात नहीं है जिसको रोचक ढंग से उन्होंने प्रस्तुत हमारे सामने नहीं किया है। और बोली और भाषा के बीच में जो अंतर संबंध है, संस्कृति और प्रकृति के बीच में जो एक संपर्क है, दोनों को उन्होंने बहुत सुचारू ढंग से, बहुत विस्तार से हमारे सामने रखा है। और मुझे याद आ रहा है कि जिनके सम्मान में आज हम यहाँ एकत्रित हुए हैं, प्रोफेसर सुधीर कुमार चैटर्जी, उनमें और उनके बोलने की जो शैली थी, जिस शैली में एक साहित्य और भाषा का दोनों का दखल, दोनों में पारंगतता, दोनों में जो एक परस्पर संबंध है उसको सामने ले आकर बोल पाना, वो जो शैली थी उसी का एक उदाहरण मैंने देखा प्रोफेसर पांडे के बोलने के तरीके में। जब हम लोग छात्र थे संस्कृत कॉलेज और प्रेसिडेंसी कॉलेज के उस ज़माने में, तो साल में एक बार कभी कभार भूले भटके प्रोफेसर चैटर्जी आ जाते थे हमारे यहाँ बोलने के लिए। और सच पूछिए तो इट वॉज ए ट्रीट टू लिसन टू प्रोफेसर सुधीर कुमार चैटर्जी। Of course, what you can easily see that you can't really hold him up into a topic. You can't really restrict him to a topic. He goes on like ever-flowing water, moving from one discipline to the other, moving from one example to the other. ऐसे ही लगता था कि अब जो मैनेजर जी बोल रहे हैं तो बोलते ही जाएं, हम लोग सुने केवल। तो बहुत अच्छा लगा। एक दो बातें हम सुनीति बाबू के विषय में कहेंगे और उसके बाद में जो हमारा मूल विषय है कर्स ऑफ डायलेक्ट्स, क्राइसिस फॉर लिंगोज, उसके बारे में हम चर्चा करेंगे। समस्या मेरे सामने ये है कि फॉर्मल रूप से, औपचारिक रूप से मैंने हिंदी का अध्ययन कभी किया नहीं है और हिंदी में बोलने के आदी नहीं हूँ। कभी किसी सभा में या मंच में मैंने हिंदी में भाषण नहीं दिया है, इसलिए कुछ त्रुटियाँ होंगी तो आप हमें माफ़ कर देंगे। हम मूलतः बांग्ला माध्यम से पढ़े हैं और बांग्ला और अंग्रेज़ी में ही हम काम करते हैं, तो मेरी जो मूल वक्तृता होगी वो अंग्रेज़ी में होगी, लेकिन कुछ बातें हम आपके सामने रखना चाहेंगे सुनीति बाबू के विषय में। एक बात तो ये है समझने वाली बात कि एक समय था जब हम लोग तुलनात्मक भाषा विज्ञान को, कंपैरेटिव फिलॉलॉजी को अमल नहीं देते थे। भारत में इसकी चर्चा होती नहीं थी, इतिहास की चर्चा होती थी, पुरातत्व की का अध्ययन होता था, बहुत तरह के अध्ययन होते थे, लेकिन तुलनात्मक भाषा विज्ञान में हमारी कोई रुचि उस समय नहीं बनी थी। तो ये श्रेय सुनीति बाबू को जाता है कि उन्होंने शुरुआती तौर पर 1916 से ही जिस तरह से अपने को इस विषय के साथ जोड़ा है और इस विषय को फिर बाकी अन्य विषयों के साथ जोड़ा है। ये बहुत लोग कहते हैं कि सुनीति बाबू ने कोई ठोस काम क्यों नहीं किया है। ODBL लिखने के बाद में भाषा विज्ञान में एक कोई ऐसा ही ठोस काम क्यों नहीं करते थे। अगर इसका उत्तर हम देना चाहें तो देखेंगे कि वो किसी एक विषय में अपने को आबद्ध नहीं रखना चाहते थे, एक विषय में अपने को रिस्ट्रिक्टेड नहीं रखना चाहते थे, साहित्य में भी रुचि लेते थे। जबकि टैगोर के साथ वो श्याम देश घूमने गए और उसके बाद में आके अपने ईस्ट एशिया के बारे में एक किताब लिखी, तो उसके बाद में टैगोर ने कहा कि हम तो सोचते थे कि ये सुनीति कुमार केवल भाषा विज्ञानी, एक नीरस भाषा विज्ञानी ही है, लेकिन उस किताब के बाद पढ़ने के बाद हमें लगा कि नहीं, इनमें साहित्य गुण और इनमें इनके लेखन की शैली में साहित्यिकता इतनी अधिक है कि बाकी जो क्रिएटिव राइटर्स हैं उनको भी ये हरा दे सकते हैं। तो इस तरह से वो साहित्य में रुचि लेते थे, संस्कृति में रुचि लेते थे और बहुत सारे विषयों में रुचि लेते थे। जिस तरह से करीब 30-35 भाषाएं बोलते थे, वैसे ही अलग अलग विषयों में रुचि लेते थे। तो ऐसे एक महान विद्वान हमारे बीच कभी जीवित थे और कभी चलते फिरते थे और हम लोगों ने देखा है, जिन्होंने उनको देखा है और सुना है, तो यही बहुत बड़ी बात है। और मैं समझता हूँ दैट इज समथिंग विच इज अ कॉज फॉर सेलिब्रेशन। तो उनके 125वीं वार्षिकी में आपने जो ये आयोजन किया है, उसके लिए मैं आप सभी को बधाई देना चाहता हूँ। थोड़ा छोटा कर सकते हैं कि इसको? इसमें कुछ कट रहा है, ऊपर से कट रहा है, ऊपर से कट रहा है, नीचे कुछ रहा है। ठीक है, थैंक यू जी। ठीक, वहाँ से ही दिखाई पड़ा। Basically, we are talking about identity, crisis of identity in this event. And since we are talking about identity, let's begin with the question of identity. How do we look at identity? How do we define identity? The classic book in this area is by Erik Erikson, which is Identity, Youth and Crisis, 1968. And Erikson says that it's through a series of dichotomies of crises that your identity is formed. Right from childhood to the adulthood, you pass through a series of crises. He gives examples. If you look at this one in the red at the bottom, in the infancy, you pass through trust versus mistrust. These are all dichotomies. Like these structuralist dichotomies, Chomskyan dichotomies, these are all dichotomies. Trust versus mistrust. You pass through that. And you have to win over that particular thing during your infancy. When you are a toddler, you pass through a dichotomy of autonomy versus shame and doubt. You start having a shame on yourself. Your body is formed. And I'm sure all of us have really passed through this area. No? We also have doubt. Can we do it? Of course, the answer can be yes, we can. But that is a doubt which everybody faces. Can we speak? Can we act? Can we do something? Can we play? Whichever field we are proficient in. Your platform is a problem. You have to connect it. In the preschool days, you have the dichotomy of initiative versus guilt. Next stage, school age, industry versus inferiority. Then during the adolescence period, you have the identity versus role confusion. Early adulthood, intimacy versus isolation. Do you want to live together? Do you want to stay alone? Or do you want to work together? This is the problem. And then the middle age, generativity versus stagnation. Quite often, the big problem during the middle age, I'm sure some of us who have passed through this in the recent time would remember that, am I able to speak something new? Am I able to write something new? Or am I stagnated? This is a big crisis which happens. During the maturity age, it is the integrity versus despair which becomes most important. Now, this is the way, through a series of dichotomies, an individual forms one's identity. It's the same problem with the groups. And speech groups, whether you call it Boli or Bhasha, they also go through the similar kind of experience. To that, Erikson's series of dichotomies, James Marcia in 1980 added how do we actually find the status of groups or individuals in this area? And he says that you have identity versus role confusion or intimacy versus isolation. These become very crucial states. Let's look at that. The questions that arise here are: who am I? Is this me? What are my goals? These are the questions which arise here. And you have the question of commitment, question of exploration, and if you put them together, there are 4 possibilities that emerge. We will talk about each of these possibilities in detail now. One is foreclosure, another is moratorium, then identity achievement, and identity diffusion. Let's look at these 4 and find out what's happening. Now, foreclosed groups really are people who do not or cannot think of themselves on their own. They're given an identity by somebody else. America tells you how to run your country, you run the country that way. Your parents tell you that you must be a medical doctor, so you start studying, struggling to become a doctor. Somebody else tells you that this is how you should really do. You are a son of a great actor, so you must be a great actor yourself. So then you start becoming a great actor. Now, so this is a problem. It's foreclosed group. Your identity is foreclosed. Second is a moratorium group. So the problem here is if it is a small language which is trying to grow, which is trying to become an important literary language. There are many which are struggling at this point of time. How do they actually act? How do they react? Will their destiny be decided by the majority language? Will somebody sitting in the Hindi empire tell us how to develop our Boliyan? That's the big question. That's the big problem, which I think Professor Pandey has also referred to. So, second is the groups of moratorium. This status explore their identities without any commitment to any ideology. Usually there is anxiety, high self-esteem, internally oriented behavior. You are looking within yourself. You're not really looking out for a model. Cultural sophistication. You have a problem of rebellion and acceptance both. This is happening in the case of moratorium. The third state is a state of achieved identity. Usually, these are success stories committed to a certain ideologies that fits in the values, fits the belief system. This makes them independent, smart, confident, self-esteem, and even in unfamiliar situations. You look at a very important paper in anthropology by Delheims. Delheims has a paper called Two Types of Linguistic Relativity. In that paper, he describes very interestingly, says that there is a big language, huge language, which is slowly dying out, and that is because they have accepted the evaluation by others about themselves, that we are no good, we cannot achieve, rather than having self-esteem, rather than having a sense of achievement. Whereas this small language, which is struggling for the right kind of number to really survive, but they have not given up for centuries together and fighting all the time. So he was giving the example of various American Indian languages, which ones are surviving, why, and which ones are not surviving, why, even though the number is in their place, in their favor still. Now, the fourth one is identity diffusion. Identity diffusion comes in a variety of styles. And at their best, diffusions can appear extremely flexible and adaptable. They can be whatever their current influences shape them to be, but in the absence of a self-definition, they must constantly look externally to define who they are and who they want to be, who they will be. At their worst, diffusions are lost and isolated, beset by feelings of emptiness and meaninglessness. This is where actually most of our dialects located. They are actually restless. They think they're empty. They think they're not making enough sense to the people who are writers, readers in majority languages, which is why quite often some of our dialectal speakers who decide to write in a majority language, like in Dalit literature case, they make a very strident voice, they make a very new, a fresh kind of writing, which startles everybody, which actually creates some uneasiness among the gentry, the gentlemen or gentlewomen writers who are used to read very sophisticated language. So they give away, they throw away sophistry in some sense. So if dialects suffer from foreclosure or identity diffusion problems, their crisis of identity will begin from there. Main question Professor Pandey raised is talk about disappearance of language, death language of the various dangers that are facing our languages. Main question is it their destiny? Should they die? Must they die? He mentions the case of Andhra Pradesh and Chandrababu Naidu. The person who was, because I spent 14 years in Andhra Pradesh, and I remember when I was raising this hue and cry about dying languages in the Arakku Valley and various other places in Andhra Pradesh, somebody who was the chief advisor to the chief minister came and told me on the stage, as I was sitting here with Professor Pandey and Imtiaz, he told me, you tell me one thing frankly, whatever noise you may make on the mic, what is the harm if a few people die? What is the harm if few languages die? After all, those which will survive, those which cannot survive will die. I mean, this is the nature. This is the human nature, this is the actual nature. So why should we make so much of noise about dying languages and dying cultures? So this question is a serious question. I mean, if you see that some serious politicians and serious administrators also think this way, you're really alarmed. Is it something which is in the right of civil society paradigm? It is not in the right of civil society paradigm. It's against the civil society paradigm that let people die, let cultures disappear, let languages disappear. For a long time, this alarm bell has been ringing, and obviously, slowly, mother tongues are losing in the number game. You might ask me, sir, how? Supposing a mother tongue is spoken by a few lakhs, why should they die? What is going to happen is, if you look at the census from 1891 till 2011, you will find year after year, decadal, there is this disappearance of lots of speakers of some language. The language level is existing, but the number of speakers is becoming less and less. No, this is absurd. When the whole country is progressing at the rate, supposing there is a 5% increase, 10% increase in the population, then why should a language population become less? It is illogical, but that's what is happening. So that is something which is something which we should really be worried about. So in that sense, there was a red alert given by various agencies, particularly IUCN has given us a red alert, International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, which said that 21% of mammals, 12% birds, 4% fishes are nearly extinct. Following that, ethnologue linguist M.P. Lewis in 2009 had stated that 516 of world's languages, that is 8.6%, are nearly extinct. Where are they located? 170 of them are located in two Americas, North and South, 210 in the Pacific, 78 in Asia, 46 in Africa, and 12 in Europe. Now, what do we do for these people? I am saying this with some definiteness because it's important to understand that the team which Professor Pandey referred to, the UNESCO World Atlas of Endangered Languages, for that atlas was prepared by a group of 30 people, and I was the only person from South Asia who was part of that team. So I knew what limitations of that atlas are, and what problems we faced in creating this atlas, and the rest of it is history. But what can we do about this crisis? Can we do something about this crisis? Answer comes from David Crystal. David Crystal in 2002, Language Death, the book called Language Death, he mentions that we must take some proactive action to be able to save our speeches. हमारे बोलियों को बचाने के लिए कुछ हमको करना चाहिए. What is it that he's suggesting? 4 points he's suggesting. Let's understand them. 1, just as ecological diversity is essential, similarly linguistic diversity is also essential. So let's agree, let's accept that diversity is the rule. In fact, a lot of economists at one point of time had stated that look, your economy, Indian economy particularly, is faltering because you have too many languages and too many speeches and too many cultures. Unless you become all anglicized, unless you have one language or Hindiized or Sanskritized, whichever way you look at it, unless you eliminate your Prakrits, unless you forget about your Apabhramshas and Bolis, you can't really progress. This was a basic problem that was kind of floated at one point of time. But we survive with a complex of network or relationship where take out one species from the network, the rest of it will crumble down. It's like a puzzle. It's a beautiful maze from where if you just remove one block, the whole system will collapse. So this is the kind of situation we are in. And if you look at the dislocation because of large dams, dislocation that has happened among the tribals, particularly Adivasis, who had to leave their space, who had to leave their own old livelihood, traditional livelihood. What a disaster that has really created in central India, in particularly in Madhya Pradesh and various other places. Second point is the shared memory and history and shared cultural practices. These give us an index, a symbol, and a marker of identity. If you are disturbing this shared memory, then it's a problem. If this memory is gone, then you do not care whether now I should be called a Santal or I should be writing the next census myself as Bengali. Then people, will forget about that shared class, shared identity, shared stories, shared mythologies. The third point David Crystal mentions in Language Death is that languages are linked to the past. And to that, Nettle and Romain had added, saying that every language is a living museum, a monument of every culture it has been vehicled to. Supposing you have used a language for various cultures, then that language has actually preserved so many museums in one place, so many libraries in one place. Colin Baker says that when you really reconstruct your past, which past will you reconstruct? There are many pasts. Will you reconstruct your Sanskritic past or will you reconstruct your Prakrit past? So rooting or linking everything up to Sanskrit, all sciences, all discoveries. I remember a Rhodes Scholar in Cambridge was working on 325 Bengali Kobiraji texts. There are 325 medicinal texts in classical, medieval and modern, pre-modern Bengali, which are worth looking at very seriously for the medical scientists, for researchers. So that is surely true of many other languages, that there are very interesting texts which need to be looked into. Fourth point he mentions is, all human languages contribute to totality of human knowledge. And a loss of a language means that part of the vision dies. In short, all the creativity, including art, poetry, music, science, everything will disappear if you really remove the dialects, remove these speech groups. Now, speech varieties, ground reality is this. As Christopher Musley is saying, the language death has been always a problem. empires have come and gone by, but their true staying power, their lasting influence over many generations, long after the trappings of government and formal administration have disappeared, lies in the power of language. If language has survived, then all the history will survive, memory will survive, everything will survive. Now, the fifth point that Crystal had mentioned is that speech varieties, even otherwise on themselves, they're very interesting things to study. Now, I have given you, for the students particularly, if you note down the UNESCO reference, in fact, it's a wonderful thing to remember. This particular URL that I've given you here, www.unesco.org/culture/language-atlas. Please go there and you can really play with that whole map, the GIS map there, and you can pick and choose which part of the world that you want to see. You can look at that and find out which are the ones which are endangered and to what extent they're endangered. But the problem is that we were depending on secondary sources. Obviously, I had only 1 year time to work on this, and I was handling Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, India, so many countries, including the Himalayan chain. So you can imagine that pressure on all of us from the UNESCO side was tremendous. And we have put it down, but I'm sure that these need to be really surveyed in detail, and I hope the surveys that are being conducted by Bharatiya Bhasha Sansthan or the Registrar General of India or Ganesh Devi's PLSI, hope they will do something and we have the gap filling up there. Now, what can we do actually? Since if we think that language attrition will happen, what is the way out? What can we do? I have suggested a few options here. One is we can think about an awareness program among these people. This is very crucial. Secondly, we think that economic prosperity is very crucial, but there is a danger of lurking here also. One of our colleagues asked a lady in Andaman and Nicobar that now that government is paying so much of attention to you, you must be very happy. She said, no, we are not exactly that happy. Earlier, our menfolk used to go on the high ocean with the boat to get fish, and sometimes for 7 days together, because of stormy weather, they wouldn't be able to come back, and they don't mind not eating properly for 7 days, and they'll come back victorious with so much of catchment of fish. But now it's 1 o'clock and we are hungry, and 8 o'clock we are hungry. So this, your life, your style of life has really influenced us. So we have really forgotten our style of life. So that's a problem. Third is give them constitutional rights, political rights to protect themselves. Increase their domain of use, particularly FM radios and various other devices. There is some action which is happening in this area. I have been told that some tribal groups have really got together and they are trying to set up an FM radio network of the tribal cultures and languages. Have a critical mass of community membership, have a stable literacy program, promote intra-ethnic identity, create a recognition and reward system, because this is something which is very important. Unless your value, your efforts are valued, a lot of people won't like to come here and help resisting the dominant culture and the killer languages. So, what are the things that we can create as students of language? Because remember that it's not a question of one doesn't have to be a student of linguistics to be able to do that. Student of Hindi, student of Bangla, student of many Indian languages, they can all join in doing this kind of work. They can create grammar, they can create documentation, create primer, language games. You need to have special kind of training to be able to do that, but you can do that. Promote literacy, create general purpose dictionaries of thesauri, specialized glossary, cultural and visual documentation, create style manuals, because languages or dialects which are newly being written, they need to form a style. It's a fortunate thing for Bangla writers today that we had somebody like Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar who thought about the stylistics matters long ago. After that, of course, many revisions have happened, but we need to help these people with the style manuals in this direction and encouragement of literary activity. Possible outcome is that our national system will have speech groups surviving for equal rights and opportunities. They will have a forum for addressing the development issues, and hopefully this will lead to empowerment of people, marginalized groups. Nurturing diversity will also minimize the socio-economic disparity among language groups. It will provide more job opportunities for them, and specialists from them, the communities, can emerge, and they will themselves then be able to take the leadership to be able to run this show. So this is the big picture. Some of our students who may not know how big the picture is, what is exactly the variety, I will take only 3 or 4 more minutes to finish my talk. This is the big picture that we have in the country. 1576 nationalized mother tongues. You're talking about संख्या क्या कितनी है बोलियों की, and 1796 other mother tongues which have not yet been classified, not yet been nationalized. So if you look at this, we have a huge number of newspapers being published today. We have 82,000 newspapers coming up now compared to 1971. In 2011, in 40 years, the number you see from 3,954, the number has become at least 100 times. 82,000 newspapers published, but not in so many languages, only in 35 languages. So, if you look at this issue of language in education, school education, if you leave out Arabic, French, German, etc., then, and if you think English is not an Indian language, then 42 Indian languages are really regularly, seriously studied or taught in the school education level. And this is becoming actually less and less with years going by. There was a survey done by McConnell and Mahapatra Padmanabhan in 1989, which looked at 96 out of 114 major languages, that is languages which are spoken by 10,000 plus people. And they found that in 50 of them, serious creative writing is going on. We do not know of those 50. We only hear about only 8 major languages most of the time. Maybe some other 8 languages out of our 22 constitutional languages. There's a tremendous pressure on small language groups. They're dislodged very seriously every time. They leave quite often in disgust or in a helpless manner, or they get engaged in an armed conflict. We may give them a name of Naxalism, we may call them whatever it is, but basically it's for the rights. It's rights for their culture, rights for the way of living, rights for their way of life, which you are threatening. And that's what is actually a problem, becoming a problem now. So if we do not really do anything for them, then our problem is there will be displacement. They will all leave and serious problems will emerge here. And net effect of displacement is that they will be marginalized, mortality will increase, morbidity will increase, there will be great food insecurity, split families, disorganization, etc. You might ask me, sir, is it a serious matter? If you look at the serious statistics here, based on IDMC, Internal Displacement Monitoring Center from Norway, for the whole world, this is the serious situation. Refugees, 1979 million, and internally displaced because of this kind of pressure. Small languages, small groups being displaced, only 5 million. But today, 2004 onwards, refugees are becoming only 13 million, but displaced people are 25 million. It's a very serious matter actually. So situation is very crucial. If you do not take really great steps, this is what will happen. And this is the world map of displacement that I'm showing you here. I'm leaving this actually presentation behind for your students so they can look at this carefully later on and study. You look at the way where these things are located. So what is the lesson? What is the lesson that we learn? Lesson is, we had a statement coming from social linguists like Professor Pandit, Prabodh Pandit, that we, or Professor R.N. Srivastava, that we generally retain our languages, we do not really give up our languages. But today in the reality, if you look at this, second, third generation migrants adopt the other languages, regional languages, change their identity. This is becoming a serious issue. And certain clusters and pockets arise in the country which are really problem areas. We need to really look at them, look at the distress signals very carefully, and take this is the whole Indian picture. If you look at the red, these are the places where endangered languages are located. Now if you look at this total picture, you will understand that a lot of problem areas, disturbed areas in the country are also coming from this side. I'm not saying this is the only cause of disturbance, but this is also a very serious cause of disturbance, which is actually political disturbance, administrative problems, which are coming because of that. There are two issues of importance here. How could we develop smaller languages and cultures in a diverse space? And secondly, can language technology help? And this is something which we need to seriously think about. To my mind, we also have to make a difference between the real danger and the perceived danger. The real danger can be tackled by the moves one can make in promoting, propagating ideas of civil society. And perceived dangers are more dangerous because it can erode all confidence. If confidence is gone, your identity is disturbed and crisis of identity begins. I think in that respect, this is something which is a very serious matter, and we need to help many of the small groups in that. So thank you very much for your patience, and I hope I made some sense to the seminar.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद प्रोफेसर उदय नारायण सिंह सर। जैसा कि आप सभी जानते हैं कि सर भारतीय भाषा संस्थान मैसूर के 10 वर्षों तक निदेशक रहे हैं और इन्होंने वहाँ पर अपने कार्यकाल में इतना अधिक काम किया। नेशनल ट्रांसलेशन मिशन की स्थापना हो, नेशनल टेस्टिंग सर्विस की स्थापना हो और कई सारे प्रोजेक्ट्स कि आज CIL वर्ल्ड लिंग्विस्टिक्स जोन में कह सकते हैं, भाषा विज्ञान के क्षेत्र में भारतीय भाषा संस्थान जाना जाता है। इस पूरे व्याख्यान में हमने देखा कि प्रोफेसर पांडे सर जिन हिस्सों को विस्तार नहीं दे पाए थे उन पर विस्तार से हमको सुनने को मिला। और एक आज की तारीख में लिंग्विस्टिक जो सोसाइटी है वो बोलियों और भाषाओं के भविष्य को लेकर के कैसे देख रहा है वो हमने देखा। मैं समय का चूँकि काफ़ी हम विलम्ब हो चुके हैं, मैं प्रोफेसर इम्तियाज़ हसनैन सर को आमंत्रित करता हूँ कि वे अपने पावर पॉइंट प्रेजेंटेशन से अपने विचार रखें।
फुल स्क्रीन कर दें।
Organizers, Professor Tanuja Majumdar ji, Professor Manager Pandey, Professor Uday Narayan Singh, जो हमारे, he has been my well-wisher, my elder brother, who has done a lot to me. भाभी जिनको हम कहते हैं, and हमारे ऋषि जी, हमारे लिए एक बहुत ही डिलेमा है हमारे लिए, इसलिए कि जिस तरह का एक कीनोट एड्रेस होना चाहिए वो कीनोट एड्रेस हमने सुना। जो हर उस एंगल को टच किया है जो इस विषय में, डायलेक्ट्स और क्राइसिस ऑफ आइडेंटिटी के विषय में हमें एक्सपेक्टेशन होती है। और हमारे पहले जो दो स्पीकर्स रहे हैं, हमारे मैनेजर पांडे जी और प्रोफेसर उदय नारायण सिंह, जो आई डोंट थिंक आई शुड से एनीथिंग अबाउट हिम, क्योंकि जो उनका नाम है एंड द काइंड ऑफ एन एकेडमिक एक्टिविज्म जो हमारे उदय जी में है, इनके बैकग्राउंड को लेकर के हमें एक पेपर पढ़ना है। और ये मेरे लिए बहुत डिफिकल्ट टास्क भी है, क्योंकि उस लेवल को आगे तो नहीं बढ़ सकते हैं, पर उसको मेंटेन करना ही एक इम्पॉर्टेंट टास्क है। हमने जो विषय चुना था वो ग्लोबलाइजेशन, मल्टीपल आइडेंटिटीज, लैंग्वेज एजुकेशन पर है, और इसको हम एक पोस्ट कॉलोनियल पर्सपेक्टिव से आई एम प्रोवाइडिंग अ क्रिटिक टू दैट। बहुत चीजें इसमें से जो हम बात करेंगे वो आ चुकी हैं। जब when we are talking about globalization, और I would like to say कि जो limitations हमारे साथ है वो ये है कि बैकग्राउंड रहा हमारा जिसमें कि अंग्रेजी माध्यम से पढ़ाई की है, but despite having an education through English medium, I have not kept myself away from my own mother tongue. For many people, late modern society is characterized by instability and complexity. It marks an existence in which the use of new means of communication are continuously challenging the boundaries across time and space. Living in a late modern society is also characterized by rapidly diversifying society, not only due to the emergence of new forms of communication and migration, but also because of the ever-growing information technology and other forms of media. When people migrate, their ways of being with words can be perceived as different or wrong in the new place of living. It may even become censured. और मेरा जो एक्सपीरियंस अभी दो प्रोजेक्ट्स में है, एक जो हम काम कर रहे हैं इंटरनली डिस्प्लेस्ड पॉपुलेशन जो नर्मदा के लोग थे, जो 20 साल से अपनी जगह से पावड़ी एंड भीली ट्राइब महाराष्ट्र में जो है, जो उन्हें अलग करके दूसरी जगह बसाया गया है। हम लोग कुछ लोग मिल करके 3 यूनिवर्सिटीज़ हैं, हम लोग मिलकर एक प्रोजेक्ट जो कर रहे हैं, एंड दैट इज़ अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग एक्सपीरियंस, क्योंकि उन लोगों के सोशल, कल्चरल एंड लिंग्विस्टिक प्रैक्टिसेस का जो लॉस हो रहा है उसको हम लोग देख रहे हैं। द फिलोसॉफिकल आइडियोलॉजी ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन इज नॉट इकोनॉमिक इन जेनेसिस. द इकोनॉमिक कंसिडरेशंस आर नॉट एम्ड एट इकोनॉमिक बेटरमेंट ऑफ द सोसाइटी, rather the perpetuation of power and privilege in the hands of Western dominated economies. It in a way supports the dominance of the Western ideology over non-Western societies. In a globalized world of today, where both people and goods move across geographical borders, the nation state continues to constitute a central institution in people's lives. Movement of human beings across national boundaries entails both movement between geographical space and subject positioning within specific discourses that locate them within certain categories. Nationalistic myth of one nation, one language, or even language as a basis for state reorganization remains salient in language and migration policy, educational institutions, as well as in dominating discourses about language, culture, and identity. Monolingual perspective on language and prevalent myths about language dialect and belonging have brought about contradiction between the diverse cultural and linguistic ways that many people live their lives and dominant discourses reflected in language practice and policy and in education policy. The challenge before us is how to bring engagement with the issues that surround this contradiction. What is important is the engagement in conversation between pluralistic cultural and linguistic experiences from a variety of positions. These positions involve in realignment in self-positioning of self and other. The realignment is to be governed by manifesting no sense of superiority, philanthropy, benevolence and arrogance. ये सब चीज़ें which are basically they are Eurocentric, Western-centric चीज़ें हैं. This engagement brings us close to the developing of an understanding of post-colonial perspective. Although the term post-colonial evokes different responses to different disciplines, by and large, it is an engagement to refer to the Eurocentric colonial past and the lingering impact and effects of new colonial relations between 1/3 and 2/3. I'm taking cue from Edward Said's Orientalism, where he uses geographic imaginary as global south, global north, which is basically Western or European world, and global south, to which all of us belong. It is the global south that has a history of colonialism and contemporary new colonial socio-economic arrangements. One can take up multiple meanings drawn from literary, cultural, and development critiques to theorize the impact of slavery, subjugation, domination, colonialism, neocolonialism, and globalization. The term post-colonial has a history. It is not, as Shauhat has rightly observed, ahistorical, universalizing, and potentially depoliticizing. Post-colonial, therefore, needs to be understood by situating the narrative within history, culture, power, and the production of knowledge that reinscribes subjugation of the global South. Post-colonial perspective provides a framework to challenge modern Eurocentric epistemologies for eliminating the diversity and heterogeneity, जिसकी आज बहुत बातें हो रही हैं, diversity and heterogeneity, within and resistance to practices which reproduce hegemony and dominance. It allows to challenge the practices of international development that privilege westernized technology to solve the global South issues. It also questions and contests the attempts made by neoliberals to wipe the historical slate clean to recalibrate relationships. This is to quote Spivak. Between the global North and South governed by purely market-oriented agenda. Declining power of self-governance that is matched by the rising power of transnational and global institutions. Accompanying the erosion of power of self-governance is the hegemony of neoliberalism and naturalization of capitalist values on which our choices of daily lives of economically marginalized are predicated, producing and reifying images which facilitate and privilege the self-representation of the West. This can be substantiated by taking the discourse of language and nationalism, which has been with us all throughout, or even treating multilingualism as a problem in national development, which Professor Singh has just pointed out, or considering script as a deciding factor in determining language dialect distinction, importance of using English or other dominant languages of the state as medium of instruction in schools that would accrue larger benefits socially and cognitively, or producing selective tradition for organizing and naturalizing language through concepts that are linear, where we talk about developed and underdeveloped or developing languages, a linear classification, relational, my language, home language, geographical, articulating knowledge that presumes to constitute the whole of all knowledge, thus affecting denial of the possibility of heterogeneity and categorizing and depicting knowledge outside the West as non-rational or of no value. जो हम करते हैं उसका कोई वैल्यू नहीं है, जो वो करते हैं उसका वैल्यू है. If people die in America, the Indians or others die in America, they're not a terrorist. But if somebody kills here, he is a terrorist. These are the values that are imposed upon us. Philanthropy and benevolence, which make the partners from Global South passive recipients of Western technology and resources. Generally, the language used here marks munificence and generosity of Global North, and the technology and resources are philanthropically given to redress social issues and potentially raise communities to more modern standards of living. This has been forcefully argued by Spivak when she says that there is a need for decentering of the language of Global North, which is grounded in charitable actions that do not effect an authentic engagement with the subaltern or critique of these conditions that produce inequality. Now, what are these post-colonial representations in the context of language? Notion of normativity in language and culture. I'm taking both language and culture together because this culture is realized through language. It is an idea, and it neither has a material existence nor it can go into any rigor of objectivity for evaluation. Culture's understanding occurs only through the medium of language. Interestingly, in current literature, culture is also treated as signifier of race that allows it to function in a reductionist manner to make them lesser human beings than us. Normativity is ideologically motivated and governed on the principle of inclusion versus exclusion, selection versus rejection, the question of power and dominance. When we talk about a standard language, the standard that we talk about, whereby you select something, your entire selection is based on rejecting many. There is the power relationship that is always operating there. A form of authority and control are constituted and incorporated in the construction of normativity. And what is lost in the process, जो हमारे मैनेजर पांडे जी ने बहुत अच्छे से बात की है कि वो जो बोली की मिठास है, that मिठास of बोली is completely gone. That cadence, that charm, the vibrance, the resonance of the entire poetry. And it is this poetry which becomes a justification of the tongue of the tribe, as Malam puts it. I'm reminded of a song from Ganga Jamuna which uses the Braj construction to talk about the charm of the situation. When the protagonist says that do hanso ka joda bichhad gayo re, gajabid hayo rama, julam bhayo re. That construction can never be achieved if you talk about it from the Khadi Boli point of view, because Khadi Boli is unable to capture that nuance, that poetry that comes from within, from Braj, from Bhojpuri, from other regional languages. Conceptualization of language, that is the way the languages are conceptualized, that is still governed by relational signification, mother tongue, native language, my language, your language. We have yet not been able to clearly define what is a mother tongue. Government of India issued an order, UGC issued an order to all the universities that आप 21 फरवरी को मातृभाषा दिवस मनाएंगे. What is a mother tongue? This is an essentialist category जो हमारे ऊपर थोप दी गई है, as if we have only one tongue, and that is a mother tongue. Geographical emphasis such as national language, state language, foreign language. Numerical connotations, first language, second language, third language, bilingual. अंग्रेजी आज भी हमारे यहाँ as it's called as English as a second language. We have not really understood the complexities that English may be a second language, but English is also a native language for many. But हमारी policy has not appreciated any of these considerations. Horizontal division between different language codes. Again, there is an emphasis today that you must have a certificate course offered by almost all the central universities on Indian Sign Language, on the lines of what we have as a British Sign Language, American Sign Language. And the vertical division, that is different codes for different learner categories, ESL, EFL, etc. The concept of bilingualism. Lot of misconceptions surround the topic of bilingualism. In language sciences, the term bilingualism continues to remain a slippery term, and this vindicates Grosjean's opinion that few areas of linguistics are surrounded by as many misconceptions as is bilingualism. The term has a bearing on the range of related concepts having relational, geographical, numerical connotations. Literature is replete with instances treating bi and multi as a hyphenated category, premised on the assumption that there is one language, plus another language, plus another, and more. In the minds of many, we still find bilingualism understood in terms of competencies in two language codes. And Professor Singh has just talked about P.P. Pandit's and Srivastav's observation. In fact, P.P. Pandit, long time back, he said that India, the bilingualism is a norm. For the West, it is an exception. In many parts of the North, monolingualism continues to be incorrectly understood as a human norm. Echoes of this can also be heard in many parts of global South. Nature of multilingualism. Misplaced sense of bilingualism has brought closure and blindness in the understanding of the notion of multilinguality. In many of our policies and debates concerning language issues, we fail to recognize that it is multilinguality and not a language, or not even one language plus another kind of multilingualism that constitutes the Indian individuals, schools, and communities. Our verbal repertoire is characterized by fluidity and heterogeneity rather than by normativity and homogeneity. Variability in linguistic behavior acts as facilitator rather than as an obstacle in communication. And boundaries of verbal repertoire are highly fuzzy, which allows multiplicity of identities. The myths, beliefs, attitudes, and stereotypes. Francis Bacon, in his much celebrated Novum Organum, wrote long time ago in 1620 and warned us against the idols of the cave, tribe, theatre, and marketplace, which impede any scientific inquiry. We are witnessing it today also. Our perception of language, our language policies, and our attitudes have rendered deaf ear to Bacon's warning. We continue to inherit myths, beliefs, attitudes, and stereotypes that are ideologically impregnated and purposely constructed in the interests of dominant group. जिसका जिक्र अभी आपने मैनेजर पांडे जी ने किया था हिस इंडियन साइंस कांग्रेस में जो हुआ. Our myth concerning language dialect dichotomy, dialects as inferior to languages, ideology of normativity that brings attributive qualities to some languages as being good versus bad, developed versus undeveloped, traditional versus modern, our treatment of variation in speech as inimical to writing. Myth of Hindi as a national language, जो इतना common myth है, without really realizing that our framers of constitution with one stroke of genius, they completely prevented a further division of the country by not allowing the protagonists to declare Hindi as a national language. And they considered issue of national language as something which is divisive for the country, particularly in the historical background of that time. The myths, beliefs and attitudes created by us are Baconian idols of the cave that individuals nourish in their minds because they would love to see things as they think they ought to be rather than as they are. These have been a cause of serious concern, for they have generated low esteem and sense of linguicism towards one's mother tongue. And it was a matter of shame जब हम अभी भी काम कर रहे हैं, जब कुरुख लैंग्वेज स्पीकर जो एक कुरुख लैंग्वेज रांची के कॉलेज में पढ़ाते थे, and now he is pulling a rickshaw because he has been denied of teaching that language in the college. क्योंकि लोग कहते हैं वहाँ यूनिवर्सिटी ने कहा कि कुरुख के कोई लड़के नहीं हैं, so we don't have to have a person, a कुरुख teacher, for which the money will not be spent by us. These have someone has just 2 days ago, in fact this is a very interesting thing, who sent a message to me which is quite relevant in this context, and I would like to share with you that if education can't stop me hurting others' self-esteem, I would better die an illiterate death. Cognitive deficit and failure in scholastic achievements. बहुत कहीं कहा जाता है कि बाइलिंगुअलिज्म, मल्टीलिंगुअलिज्म से आपका स्कॉलिस्टिक अचीवमेंट पुअर होता जाता है. Diversity and multiplicity of languages as liability. Writings of culture theorists like Edward Said, Homi Bhabha, Walter Mignolo, Gloria Anzaldúa have time and again reminded us that the place of enunciation makes a difference in our construction of knowledge. Whether we have immigrants, refugees, displaced communities or indigenous people, these are our resources. These resources are not to be perceived as liability and constraining. These should not be ignored or condemned, which mostly the dominating discourses allow us to think. These resources enable us to develop an alternative vision. These resources help us develop our ability to have double vision. They also help us position ourselves in the middle so as to have a critical orientation to what we see and what we have. The role of all educators as agent of transformation should be to provide an interaction between the actual and the imagined. We must be in touch with the world as it is, at the same time calling for the possibility of naming alternatives to the given. It is what Du Bois called the two-ness or double consciousness. The notion of hybridity. From a post-colonial perspective, what is clearly evident is the notion of hybridity in language practices and awareness of identities. Inspired by Bakhtin on the hybridity of dialogue of languages, Bhabha and other culture theorists have said hybrid language use is more than simple code switching as the alternation between two codes. It is more systematic, strategic, affiliative and sense-making process. Maintenance of many languages of the Indian subcontinent is precisely due to this hybridity of language practices. Languages are not compartmentalized, rather they overlap, intersect and interconnect, thus causing fluidity of identity. Fluidity of identity are found even in those schools which do not formally use several languages as media of education. In a post-colonial context of language and education, a great challenge is how do we weave these hybrid, multi-layered language and literacy practices and fluidity of identity found in schools. In a globalized world and a post-colonial setting, this relationship has become more relevant today than ever because, as Kanaga Raja claims, national identities are getting fragmented with the weakening of nation states. Now I'm taking up the education perspective. No one can deny that there is an emancipatory power of education. Education can be driving force in the rightings of wrongs. In countries which are part of the post-colonial experiences, issues of heterogeneity, complexity and diversity of languages and cultures, problems of access, equity, and inclusivity in education, and highly stratified socio-economic class which privileges some and denies others offer great challenges to education. Indian multilingualism and education are fraught with paradoxes and contradictions, and several other facets that largely prevail in a post-colonial setting. What are those paradoxes? These may be seen between internationalization policies and program agenda of the university and local development goals. They may also be found within the local development goals and the beneficiaries of these programs. For instance, the recent judgment in relation to mother tongue education pronounced by the Supreme Court of India, comprising the then Chief Justice and 4 justices of the Supreme Court. The judgment goes like this. We hold that a child, or on his behalf, his parent or guardian, has a right to freedom of choice with regard to the medium of instruction in which he would like to be educated at the primary stage in school. It ruled that the state could impose mother tongue as a medium of instruction in government and government-aided and recognized primary schools. But private unaided schools and linguistic as well as religious minority educational institutions would remain outside the purview of mother tongue as a medium of instruction. The Supreme Court indeed apparently thought that the right to education extends to the kind of education which includes medium of education. The market will offer the medium, not the government. The consumer must have the freedom to choose. But today, in our globalized world, the consumers are left with no choice. Parallel voices regarding use of English by various language groups also suggest paradoxes and contradictions. A favorable disposition towards the hybrid multilingual language and literacy practices and awareness of unchecked and subtractive spread of English on the one hand, and emergence of goddess English for hope and freedom on the other hand, is an interesting case here. The goddess is a 2 feet tall bronze statue based on the Statue of Liberty, and their protagonists have declared October 25th as English Day, celebrating the anniversary of Lord Macaulay. Yet another instance, and there could be many of course, is regarding the popularity of Bhojpuri films, both among the Bhojpuri migrant population and the Hindi speakers. Popularity of Bhojpuri films among the migrant speakers of dominated and submerged mother tongues not only poses challenge to the hegemony of officially recognized Hindi language in North India, but also become a resource for understanding and redefining the prevailing notion of diaspora, the diaspora that is from within. Despite these paradoxes and contradictions, we still find possibilities of negotiation in a post-colonial setting, which enable us to make sense in letting English language learning go hand in hand with multilingualism. Celebration and cultivation for syncretism. I am conscious of making a distinction between what I call celebration and cultivation. We all can celebrate diversity and plurality. And let me share with you one thing, that in 2002, when I was a fellow at the Center Institute of Indian Languages, where Professor Singh was the director, that was the first time, I suppose Professor Singh will vouch for that. For the first time, they had instituted an award called Bhasha Samman Award, and the slogan was celebrating the diversity. That was the ethos of that award. Celebration can comfortably be made a part of ideal discourse. Cultivation, however, demands change in outlook and dispensation. These terms are, as Garcia, Katnab and Guzman remind us, not only functions of power relations, they are also functions of the eyes of the imaginer. Cultivation enables us to come out of the sense of shame, which is associated with constructions like small and big, developed and undeveloped, minor and major, with reference to dominant languages. If Bodo children in Bodo medium education can do well as Assamese children in Assamese medium education, or children representing 8 tribal groups in Andhra Pradesh can have education through the medium of their own languages in 2005, these are instances that seriously challenge not only the skewed imagination of educators, but also question the traditional categories like immersion, submersion, transition, etc. These categories have been uncritically used to describe different kinds of bilingual education programs and approaches in the West, which are certainly not multilingual education programs that ought to be a part of our post-colonial experience. Symbolic violence. The state statutorily grants language equality, but language hierarchy prevails in reality. One of the state apparatuses for bringing this hierarchy is education. It unleashes what Bourdieu calls symbolic violence for producing and reproducing the homogeneity of dominant values through school media. It is a site which privileges certain understandings vis-a-vis language and represses other understandings. It is also a site for active teaching of the dominant culture values and concomitantly a passive learning where students merely learn to reproduce the cultural capital of the dominant class. Despite strong language maintenance norms, Indian multilingualism shows the hegemonic role of language that socially legitimizes a pecking order in which mother tongues are marginalized. Caught between the unequal language power relationships and in the absence of clearly marked multilingual educational policy, education in India is unable to balance the demands of societal multilingualism and the dominant status of English or any other dominant language. I'll just narrate an experience of my Jharkhand experience. While working there, and a team from NCERT, UNESCO, and Sarva Bhasha Abhiyan Vibhag, when they were the education department, when they were there to look into the status of Santhali Hindi in Jharkhand, and when they got to know that the team is coming, they immediately brought Santhali written books in the schools just to show us that they are there. And during our visit in the evening, the interesting episode took place, and I'll just talk about that, where we saw a girl, Kuruk speaking girl, whose language is never part of the school, and she is under the lamppost at night. She is learning her own language through the medium, which is a script evolved for the Kuruk language. This Jharkhand experience suggests the uncovering or deconstructing of the dominant curricula, which allows to find space and ways of engaging in resistance despite the state-controlled regimes of education. This is close to what Warren calls centrifugal, hidden, and playful activity, which has the potential to transform the conditions of the marginalized. The fact that the child was able to read and write Kuruk in Tolung Sikhi script even at home under the light of the lamppost, and also had both the encouragement from the elder members of the community and encouragement from the peer groups, is quite gratifying. It is enough to suggest that this centrifugal, hidden, and so-called playful activity can create new possibilities of bringing multilingual and multiglossic vision in schools. The challenge before us is how to capture the alternative pedagogies that allows multiple ways of knowing and doing. Challenge to sector of education in relation to language is developing a paradigm for celebrating plurality and diversity through acceptance and tolerance of linguistic and culture diversity. The task is to develop element of syncretism in multilingual education, and not a language, recognizing a language, but multilinguality, and bringing a sense of multilinguality in the classroom, where every child with a diverse language and his culture background is allowed to use. Syncretism is a diacritica of post-structuralism, which marks a complete integration of resources, not structurally, but organically, without any sense of asymmetry, power relations, and pecking order of culture disposition. And this practice is not something that is an ideal thing. Multilingual education is being in practice even today. With these words, I thank you all for being a patient hearer, and I thank the organizers for giving this opportunity. Thank you.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर। हम चाहते थे कि इस पूरे बहस में लालित्य हो, वजूद हो और शिक्षा हो। प्रोफेसर पांडे सर के पूरे व्याख्यान में हमने बोलियों का साहित्य, लालित्य, संवेदना और हमारा सरोकार हमने उसमें सुना। प्रोफेसर उदय नारायण सिंह जी ने बोलियों पर, उसके वजूद पर, उसके अस्तित्व पर जो खतरे हैं और उन खतरों को हम कैसे देख रहे हैं उस पर उन्होंने अपनी बात रखी। और एक पहलू जो थोड़ा सा छूटा हुआ था उसको प्रोफेसर इम्तियाज हसनैन सर ने पूरा कर दिया, शिक्षा पर, मल्टीलिंगुअल सोसाइटी, मल्टीलिंगुअल पैटर्न एंड मेथड ऑफ एजुकेशन। तभी हम उस विविधता को बचा सकते हैं। एक छोटी सी बात कह करके मैं प्रोफेसर तनुजा मजुमदार मैडम को आग्रह करूंगा कि वे धन्यवाद ज्ञापन के लिए, सत्र के धन्यवाद ज्ञापन के लिए वो आए। बात यह है कि जब वक्ता की सूची के बारे में सोच रहा था तो मन में एक डर सा बना हुआ था कि ये इतने बड़े बड़े वक्ता आएंगे क्या, कैसे आएंगे। तो मेरे मन से 2-3 आधार निकल रहे थे। एक तो सुनीति बाबू के नाम पे आएंगे, दूसरा प्रेसिडेंसी के नाम पे आएंगे, तीसरा अगर वो दोनों नाम नहीं प्रभावित कर सका तो उनका जो लगाव है, जो जुड़ाव है बोलियों से, वो उनको खींच लाएगा। और मुझे लगता है कि इस नए विभाग जो अभी बच्चा है और मैं उसका नवजात शिशु हूँ, तो उसकी आवाज़ सुन करके इतने बड़े बड़े लोग, शिक्षाविद, भाषाविद हमारे बीच आए हैं। हम सचमुच में बहुत, क्या कहें, बहुत खुश हैं। और लगता है कि इस सेमिनार में जो बात कही जानी चाहिए थी, जो निकलनी चाहिए थी, लगभग इन तीनों वक्ताओं ने उसमें बात रखी। मैं प्रोफेसर अपने विभागाध्यक्ष मैडम को निमंत्रित करता हूं कि वो आए और बहुत कम समय में धन्यवाद दें ताकि हम लोग भोजन के लिए चलें। जी मैम।
धन्यवाद ऋषि जी, आपने ठीक ही कहा कि हमारे जो अतिथि वक्ता आए हैं वो हमारे पर अनुग्रह है। हमारा विभाग अभी बन रहा है और इस दौरान हमने कोशिश की है कि प्रेसिडेंसी कॉलेज की जो परंपरा हिंदू स्कूल से आरंभ हुई थी और 2017 को हम 200 साल पूरा करने जा रहे हैं, लंबी परंपरा यहाँ रही है, उसी परंपरा का अंग बने हिंदी विभाग। और इसी सिलसिले में हमने इस कार्यक्रम का आयोजन किया था। मैं बहुत आभारी हूँ प्रोफेसर मैनेजर पांडे जी की। मेरा पहली बार उनसे परिचय हुआ, किताबों से तो बहुत पहले ही परिचय हो चुका था उनसे, और इस बार कई बार हम लोगों ने फ़ोन पर बात की। इतनी आत्मीयता से वो मुझसे बात करते थे, लगता था कि हम उनको मैंने बहुत पुराना रिश्ता है। बहुत अच्छा लगा आप आए, आपने अपनी बात कही। वो सारे महत्वपूर्ण पहलू हैं जिन पर हमें आगे चर्चा करनी है, उन पर आपने प्रकाश डाला। प्रोफेसर उदय नारायण सिंह जी, इतनी व्यस्तता के बावजूद भी आप आए, और केवल आए नहीं, आपने जिस तरह से कुछ सजेशंस भी मुझे दिए थे। हम तो चटर्जी की स्पेलिंग भी गलत लिख रहे थे, वो भी आपने हमें सुधार दिया कि वो किस तरह से लिखा करते हैं। तो और आज आपने जो प्रेजेंटेशन दिया, क्या कहा जाए, यह हमारे लिए एक अमूल्य धरोहर है और इसे हम रखेंगे अपने विद्यार्थियों का, अपने रिसर्च स्कॉलर्स को लेकर इस पर हम लोग फिर से काम आरंभ करेंगे, विचार करेंगे। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपका। प्रोफेसर इम्तियाज हसनैन जी, इतना अच्छा आपने प्रेजेंटेशन दिया और मुझे लगता है कि सोशियो लिंग्विस्टिक क्षेत्र में जो समस्याएं उभर करके आ रही है, हमारी बहुभाषिकता और भाषिक एकता और बोलियों का संकट, इन सब पर आपने बहुत ही अच्छे ढंग से अपनी बात रखी है। मुझे उम्मीद है आगामी सत्रों में इस पर विचार होगा। हम आपके आभारी हैं। अब तीनों ही वक्ताओं के प्रति मैं आभार प्रकट करती हूँ। यहाँ हमारे बहुत सारे मित्र बाहर से आए हुए हैं। आपने धैर्यपूर्वक इस सत्र की सफलता के लिए आप यहाँ पर रहे। आपके प्रति मैं धन्यवाद ज्ञापन करती हूँ। और इसके बाद ही हमारे लंच ब्रेक है। अनुरोध है कि आप लोग लंच करके जाइएगा। धन्यवाद। अगला सत्र 2:30 बजे शुरू होगा। सॉरी, अगला सत्र कितने बजे बोलो तो? 1:45 बजे शुरू होगा।
जी सर।